Well, good evening, everyone. My name's Catherine, Catherine Ames, and we are. Can we see the first thing? I did say when I was looking at this, actually Monday the 8th of December, I think.
Oh,
So just tiny thing. But we are Monday the 8th of December. Very welcome to this webinar, which is organised by ALL subject leaders and the ALL London, ALL London, I should say. The title of our seminar this evening is Practical Advice on Grade Estimation and Tiering for June 2026 for GCSE French, German and Spanish, and also exam board frequently asked questions. So I'm Catherine, a member of ALL Council, convener of the ALL Subject Leaders Group, and also a member of the ALL London Committee. In my spare time, I'm also head of languages at the Greycoat Hospital, which is a state comprehensive school for girls in Pimlico. We offer French, German, Spanish. So there we are. I think, Helen, in the chat, you're going to put a link to where this recording is going to be stored, aren't you? Oh, you've already done
yes,
it.
I've just done
Fantastic.
that.
Thank you. Where you can find this and also the list of any other webinars, future webinars. And so, yeah, just to reiterate the kind of etiquette around this evening's session, we are aiming to be professional and we're aiming to be kind. They're the two main things. This webinar is provided freely thanks to everyone at ALL, very generous members, and David and Helen and everyone else is really sharing a great deal of work which they've done individually, which you can adopt, adapt and edit with their permission. And this really run by volunteers is the main thing to say. So thank you, Helen and David, for preparing all of this. Absolutely fantastic. I hope you'll agree that we are all here benefiting from other people's generosity with their time and expertise. So if you think this is the right thing to do, we do hope that you support our National Volunteer Subject Association. And it's just a little plug here. If you're not a member already, that you can join. Your school can in fact join for only £135 a year, which really is the fraction, isn't it, of the cost of a day's inset training for one person. And I think Helen said it was less than the cost of one cup of coffee a week, although maybe we have to update the maths there because coffee is really expensive these days. Other memberships are available, so please do have a look. And I know that as a special offer this December, a little Christmas bonus, if you use the code ALL London 10 at the checkout, you get 10% off until the end of December, which is really fantastic. So do join if you haven't joined already. If you're already a member, please do use the chat, say how much you love it, because I'm sure, like me, if you're a member, you really do feel the benefit of subject expertise, friendship, etc., etc. Now, there's some really fantastic things coming up. The big event, which happens every year, is taking place in March this year. So March 13th, 14th of March in Leicestershire in Hinckley. And it is ALL Language World, which I've never been to actually. Helen, I was ill last year, if you remember, but it apparently is a really, really fantastic conference which happens over a weekend, and I hear there's a disco which sounds amazing. So please do come to that if you are a member, and it really may well be a reason for joining because I think the programme is looking really, really fantastic this year. There's also our ALL London January events, which Helen has worked really hard on, and the programme looks brilliant. It's only cost £10 for members. There's the chance there of a 45-minute parallel session with AQA and EdExcel, as well as our sessions with Jennifer Wozniak on GCSE and Stephen Smith on A-level. So that is really a date for your diary. Please do sign up if you haven't done already. You'll also find out about this other amazing project, which again Helen's leading on, which is, if you haven't heard of it already, London City of Languages. Do have a look. That's very, very exciting, and we're going to hear more about that then. So lots and lots of reasons to join ALL. Do join if you haven't already. But back to tonight then, back to our focus for tonight. We are looking very much at GCSE tiering, GCSE marking, and grading. And we're really, really happy to have David, who is an absolute whiz on things like this. I've heard him speak on similar things before, and it's been absolutely game changing. And perhaps you're sitting there like me, knee deep in marking your GCSE mock papers. Maybe you have a deadline to report before the holiday. I actually, just before this session, finished marking my last GCSE writing for year 11, so I'm absolutely thrilled. However, you might be wondering what to do there. So David is on hand to talk us through that. And then Helen afterwards has put together really, really fantastic, some frequently asked questions that have been taken from ALL members who responded to the email invitation, and she's gone back to the exam boards, and so she's going to feed back on that later in the session. We're also just chatting before tonight, thinking of having the exam boards come to a particular subject leaders session if there's an appetite for that. So we can certainly put that together at a later date. And as I say, they're coming to the ALL London event, so that's great. So that's tonight. Want to give the time, because obviously we've only got an hour tonight. Have you got the next slide, Helen? Is that okay? I do that. Here we are. So I thought I'd just start. I've only got 3 little things. So I'll pass over to David in a minute. But I just think it's hilarious when I see what people write in exams, and maybe your students are writing things like this. They're a little bit puzzled by the GCSE. This guy, she's like, why does the guy mumble so much? To which I replied, obviously, sorry. Maybe you, like my students, some of them are feeling like they're losing the plot a little bit. Maybe you're feeling like you're losing the plot a little bit with how to mark and how to grade these exams. So as I say, there we go, we're all in the same boat. And then finally, this is a challenge for David, actually, and so I'm going to pass over to you here. I don't know that we're actually going to be looking at a grade on demand system. This is one of my students, Sophia, wrote this on her writing exam. I don't know that I can guarantee her a 9, but I'll be led by you, David, with this. So it's really, what are we doing with these raw marks? How on earth are we going to feedback on grade currently achieving? And I think especially for those tricky borderline students, how are we deciding the tier that we're going to put them in for? And basically, where do we go from here? So, David, I'm going to pass over to you to lead us in that thinking around tiering and grade boundaries.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Hope I can try and live up to the billing. A few general remarks to begin with. Just for speed and convenience, I may well say ML GCSE rather than French, German and Spanish GCSE, but do remember that it is only French, German and Spanish that have got a new specification. The other modern languages don't. Another something that people want to say, why can't they determine the grade boundaries in advance? And I phrased it the other way around, just saying why we can't have grade boundaries determined in advance, both generally and now. And even more importantly, why it would actually be wrong and unfair on the pupils to do so, even though it sounds very reasonable and fair. And then a slightly more philosophical point is that sometimes the truth is elusive and complex and even approximate, but that doesn't mean that we should accept the simplistic but false. What does that mean in practice? Well, first point is that comparing grade boundaries can be misleading. This is a general comment. Every summer, people look at grade boundaries and they make comments. The overriding point is that grade boundaries are adjusted each year to keep the approximate percentage the same for each grade. People also then look at grade boundaries in other subjects. You know, why is it 30% in French? Why is it 95% in another subject, etc.? It just don't go there because it's too confusing. The important point is that as far as any individual subject is concerned, any change in grade boundaries will be a reflection as to whether the pupils score more or fewer marks in the papers than in other years. But we're human, and I think have to sort of recognise that, you know, when exam results come out or when you've marked all these papers, as Catherine said, you've got a list of raw marks, you want to have something tangible, some numbers. You want to be comparing, but actually, this can be unhelpful when in fact the raw marks and the boundaries don't tell you anything about standards from year to year, from subject to subject, or paper to paper. And the other broad point I'd like to make is that it's impossible to precisely define in a measurable way a grade 4 student, a grade 5 student, etc. Again, it's tempting, we want to, but it's really unhelpful in terms of trying to deal with the situation that we find ourselves in at the moment. So I've just put up there the official Ofqual statements, which echo what I've just said. I've given you the official website references. The penultimate sentence there says that the standard of work needed to get each grade remains comparable year on year. What is standards? Well, I'm not even going to try and answer that one, and we can come back to that if we wish to later. Just to highlight that Pearson produced some useful advice echoing the Ofqual statements, and also AQA have produced guidance on the misspelt tiering, sorry about that, decisions, which we'll pick up later in the exam board section. So as always, it's really great having the exam boards around and working with them to share the knowledge. And that's what is in the Pearson guide. Essentially, it's restating what Ofqual said, but it's just emphasizing why we can't and mustn't and shouldn't know what the grade boundaries are.
There's just a comment there saying, are we meant to see the PowerPoint? Can you see the PowerPoint, Catherine? Are we showing the PowerPoint? Oh, others can. Others can. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
We're all right. We'll carry on.
Okay. So let's just recap. So grade boundaries are determined to fit comparable outcomes generally, and especially when there's change. The absolute value of a grade boundary does not have an intrinsic meaning. So be really very wary of the various sets of grade boundaries which are being circulated. And I've just done a little dramatic moment. Grade boundaries, no, don't talk about them.
That was really dramatic.
So if we can't talk about grade boundaries, what can we do? Well, fortunately, we have comparable outcomes. And this kicks in, especially when there's a change in qualifications, that Ofqual and exam boards take special steps with statistical methods to ensure that students have the same chance of getting each grade before and after the change. And again, it's really focusing on the students. You want it to be fair. Whichever year they've taken the exam, they have the same chance of getting each grade. And that's what happened, those of us who were around in 2017, 2018 with the change over to the new GCSEs then. Ofqual did a lot of work, but it was very statistically driven to make sure that the chances of getting each grade remained the same. So because we know that's happening to national level, it's then possible for schools to use a similar approach, both to estimate likely grades and to make decisions on tiering. And that's what I'm going to be taking people through. We have the additional complication that there is no prior attainment information. And I've just realised that I've used a slide from last year. There's no prior attainment. There wasn't for last year's cohort, and there isn't for this year's because there's no Key Stage 2 in 2020 and 2021. I put a couple of links down the bottom there going back to 2017 and 18 so that you can see the official line from Ofqual, and that will be exactly the same. Ofqual will be reiterating this message in January. We've been talking with Ofqual about getting the communications out there, and they will be reiterating this official message in the new year. What are the grades for French, German, and Spanish? I've thrown computing in as well, because if you recall, thanks to a lot of combined work with ASCL, ALL, ISMLR, everyone working together, Ofqual did make a change to the grading standards. French and German were brought into line with Spanish, taking the profile into account. And I will pick that up later. But of course, in 2020, we didn't have exams. We had tags and CAGs. So the whole process of making the adjustments picked up again in 2023, and it was completed in 2024. And from 2024 onwards, the aim from Ofqual was to maintain that standard. So those changes were a completion of 2019. Simultaneously, there was a look at the standards in computing. So I've put a couple of graphs up there so that you can see the percentage getting a 4+ and the percentage getting a 7+. You can see the spikes in 2020 and 2021 when it was tags and CAGs. 2022 was the midway year where gradings were set halfway between the high levels and sort of getting back to normal. And then what we've seen in 2023 and 24 was the adjustment in French and German and computing. And you can see that the sort of brownish line for German, the purplish line for computing, and the cyan for French do show more of an increase than the other lines. So that's the national situation. Would just say in passing, and I'll give you more on this later, that we can see that nationally, as schools have picked up languages, they've tended to go for Spanish and have been bringing in pupils with lower prior attainment. So there's been a skew in the prior attainment profiles. So we can't compare absolute percentages because we have to take into account the prior attainment of pupils taking French, German and Spanish. And I've got some information on that later on to show you what I mean. So I'm now going to be very brave. I'm going to predict that nationally in June 2026, at grades 4+, the French percentage will be 73 to 75%, German 79 to 81%, and Spanish 69 to 71%. You may say I'm sticking my neck out, but I've got the confidence in what Ofqual have said that they're going to use these statistical methods in order to make sure that it's the same chance for students of getting those grades. And then similarly at 7+, nationally, and that includes all independent schools. So this is all the people taking the exam in England through Ofqual. At the 7+, it'll be French 28 to 30%, German 33 to 35%, and Spanish 25 to 27%. Those differences between the subjects are reflecting the different prior attainment profiles of the different subjects. And you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, thanks to some information that I'm going to share a little bit later on, of all the people doing French, we can look at their maths grade. Their maths grade was 5.7. German was much higher at 6.1. Spanish was a bit lower at 5.5. So that gives us the hard evidence that on average, it was a lower profile doing Spanish than French, and the highest one was German. And it doesn't really matter whether you take their average maths grade or their average English grade. It's a similar message of the relative prior attainment of the subjects. Helen, you're looking puzzled.
Could you repeat that bit about, you said average maths grade being 5.7?
Yes. So for all the people taking GCSE French, their average maths grade was 5.7. For all the people taking GCSE German, their average maths grade was 6.1. I, crudely speaking, they were more able, of the ones doing German were more able intrinsically than those doing French on average. Obviously, it's a spread, there's an overlap, etc. But it's just making that point that the German ones do tend to be more from a higher prior attainment or higher attainment, because in this year we don't have the prior attainment, but it does match. That's the hard evidence from 2025. Bottom right-hand corner, I've given you a web link. If you go there, you can download all the grades for all the subjects for about the last 8 years. Loads of fun. If you want a diversion from marking papers, download it and see what's there.
Delighted at that prospect.
Right. So we've established what the situation is nationally. So what I'm suggesting as a starting point is that schools can have the confidence to know that they're going to be maintained at that level nationally, and therefore within the school, assuming that the ability group, or so ability profile of the students doing the subject is the same as in previous years, we can use the distribution of grades. We'll talk later about checking it and what you do if it's not quite the same, but our starting assumption is that the ability profile of those doing, say, French in your school is the same as it was last year and in June 2024. What we're going to do then is to rank the pupils on the assessments that they've taken, and then we're going to allocate a grade using the likely distribution. That's the overall process that we're going to follow. We've got the grade distribution, we rank the pupils, and then we can allocate a grade to them using that distribution. Part of the cross-checking we can do is to look at the English and maths grades obtained in the actual exams, what they've been being given currently, etc., and do some sort of triangulation to see if things are making sense. There's a lot of sense checking here, and hopefully you will be able to do the triangulation and get it all to hang together. And if it doesn't, then actually it's worth trying to unpick what's not working properly. And as always, do contact us. I'm more than happy to help. Now, language. This is so important. Every school uses a different, well, sorry, they use the same words, but it has a different meaning. You know, you say to the teachers, well, what's the grade mean that you're giving them? Is it their expected performance, their minimum expected on the flight path, their achievement, their target, etc., etc., etc.? It's so important to be clear what your school's policy is and to make sure that your grades that you're going to give match your school's policy. What I'm going to be describing is a process that will give you realistic expected grades. If your school's policy is to be aspirational, then you'll need to make some adjustments upwards. If it's minimum expected grade, you need to make some downwards, etc. So I say really, really important to try and unpick what people actually mean. And I say by looking at comparing perhaps what were the grades given this time last year with what happened in the summer might give you some sense as to what your school's policy is around that. But this is the area where it's so easy to trip up. But I say, I'm going to be giving you a process to give some realistic expected grades, and then you can make the necessary adjustments. So, worked example, and so do see your data manager or other colleagues. We are going to be doing some calculations. I know that some people aren't comfortable with that. Please don't worry. The slides are going to be available. So please ask your data manager or another colleague, and then they can help you work your way through this. So I've taken some nice round numbers to make it easier to follow through. So let's assume, and I say, take French as the example. You need to do it separately for French and German and Spanish. If you do all three, you can't combine them together. So let's assume that over the last couple of years, there were 60 pupils taking French GCSE. So in the right-hand column, you can see that I've listed the number of pupils getting each grade. So for example, 6 pupils got a grade 9, 12 got a grade 5, etc. If we divide that by the total number, which was 60, we can convert that to the percentage, which is in the middle column. So 10% got a grade 9, 20% got a grade 5, etc. Right. Our starting assumption, as I said, is that the cohort ability profile is the same as in previous years. That'll give you a starting point, and then you can make adjustments from that. So we're now going to use the percentages that we've just calculated and the number taking French this year to work out how many we think are going to get a grade 9, etc. So we already established that last year it was 10% got a grade 9. There are now 80 doing French in year 11, and therefore 10% of 80 is 8. So we're saying that 8 would get a grade 9, and we work our way down, and it all adds up to 80. So that gives us a starting point in terms of the number of pupils that we think are going to get each grade. The next step is to rank the pupils using whatever assessment information you feel is relevant. You may have given them a recent mock exam. You may want to bring in practice speaking tests, the year 10 exam. You could weight those. That's your professional judgment, is to get what you think is a combination of marks that is likely to reflect their exam performance. And this is all around exam performance, because that's what the grades are relating to. And psychologically, it's important before you go and assign grades to use your professional judgment comparing adjacent pupils. Just look at that ranked list, go down it and say, oh, is Billy actually likely to get a higher grade than Fred, etc. So use your professional judgment to make those adjustments. That's absolutely fine. And it is focused on the exam. So all of this is in terms of who's more likely to get a higher grade. So when you've got your ranking order correct, we can now go back to the numbers that we've said are going to get each of the grades. So for example, we said that 8 of them were going to get a grade 9. So you just give a grade 9 to the first 8 pupils. Then there are 8 who are going to get a grade 8. So you give 8 to the next and just work your way down through the grades, and that way you're assigning a grade to each student. Fine. So if you were doing a subject that didn't have tiering, that would be the end of the process.
That's smart. Someone said that's smart.
Okay, that's fine. So somebody asked, what about predicted grades? That's where I would just go back to the language. I'm here, this is a realistic estimated grade at the end. What you need to be clear about is, what does your school mean by quotes predicted, and then make the necessary adjustment relative to the final grade that people are likely to get. However, in French, German and Spanish, we have tiering, which makes life more complicated, because you can't just use the raw marks, because the raw marks in foundation are going to be higher than higher, because that's the whole point of having the 2 separate papers. So what do we do in that case? Right. So we get the overall distribution as I've done there. I've highlighted the overlap grades, because remember, higher is 4, 5 and upwards. Foundation is 5 and 4 and downwards. I've put the official wording, I've given the quote from it. A few in higher might get a 3, but for now, sort of ignore that as far as any calculations. That's sort of a little safety net. Although we are pushing Ofqual to say, just as they did in 2018, just as a one-off, could they stretch that? But Ofqual haven't said anything around that. We will push because we think it's fair, but don't count on that. Right. We're now going to repeat the same process we did previously using the tiered outcomes. So in my example, back in 24-25, for foundation, we had 20 students. For higher, we had 40 students. And the important thing that you do now is to look back at what happened in 24 and 25, put in the grades for foundation, as I've done there. We had 4 getting a 5, 4 getting a 4, 9 getting a 3, and then calculate the percentages of the number doing that tier. So there are only 20 doing foundation, 9 of them got a grade 3, so 45% of those doing foundation got a grade 3. And then we can repeat that for the higher tier. But the key thing here is that you're doing it as a percentage of each of the tiers. Now we can apply it to the current year 11. So if you remember, we assumed that there were more doing French in the current year 11. So let's assume that there are 30 doing foundation this year compared with 20 in previous years. But we do a similar process. We look at the percentage. We take 20% of 30, and that gives us 6, etc. You may well get some decimal points around. Don't worry too much, just make a manual adjustment, be slightly generous, but the total still comes to 30. So we've done that for foundation. We repeat it for higher, and again, just do some sensible rounding of decimal points. This is approximate. Remember I said at the beginning, truth is approximate. We don't get too hung up over whether it's 8 or 7. And now we bring it all together. So you can see how I've started with, over on the left-hand side, when it was all bundled together, split it by tier. I add the tiers together. And on the very right-hand side, you can see the consequence of adding the tiers together. If you're really sharp-eyed, you'd notice that for grade 3, I'd said it was 12 on the simplistic approach. It's 13.5 if you break it down by tiers. If you're really on the ball mathematically, you'll notice that the proportion doing foundation and higher is slightly different this year than it was previous year. That's why the mathematics doesn't quite work out. But as I said, truth is approximate. This is pretty accurate in terms of what you're trying to achieve at this stage. So you end up with numbers getting each grade from each of the tiers, and now you can allocate the grades to the pupils within the tiers. Have a particular look at the overlap grade. What exam did they go in for? Was it the right one? Some schools actually put them in for both to get a feel as to which is the right one. Again, please use your professional judgment just to make slight tweaks there. But that should give you some help in terms of making overall decisions about the grading.
And can I say that the exam boards have given a lot of advice in their separate documents about how to decide on which to put them in for.
Right. And as if by coincidence, Bruno and NF have teed up for me the nice question of, well, what do you do if you think that the oh, is that Natalia? Thank you, Natalia. If you think that your cohort is better than in previous years. So this is where we can get some triangulation on the situation, and I'm really grateful to Steve House from SMID. SMID is an excellent MI system that helps with analysing grades, keep storing information, etc. And so if you had prior attainment information, then you'd be clear about the ability profile of the group, but we don't because there weren't any key stage 2. What we can do though is know what are they likely to be getting in maths and English, because within the school, everybody pretty much is going to do maths and English. And at a school level, people will be making judgment around the overall ability profile of the whole cohort of the whole school. And that's why it's important that you have a conversation with your senior team, your data managers, to get a sense of what the whole school situation is. So what has Steve given me? Well, what we've got here is to look at the June 2025 figures and say of all the people, pretty much state schools, which is more representative probably of the students that we're looking at, what were the percentage that people got in French and for maths? So I've done a little red ring in the top corner. So 3% of all students who are doing French got a 9 in French and a 9 in maths. 5% got a 5 in French and a 6 in maths, which is a pattern that we start to see because we have severe grading. And if you're really on the ball and add up the numbers who've got a higher maths grade than French, you'll find that it's 55% of all students, and it's only 20% the other way around. Really stark way of bringing home just the impact of severe grading and how kids and parents will just look at their maths grade and their French grade, and they will mistakenly think that they are worse at French than maths. So these are really quite powerful figures to be sharing with pupils, parents, teachers, whoever, to show the impact of severe grading in terms of the comparisons that people make for their grades in languages compared with their grades in maths and English. So how do we use that information? Well, That's what I'm going to show you now. Because within the school, everyone will have done maths marks, English language, they will have a predictor grade or whatever language it is for maths and English. And we can start to use that information to get a genuine sense as to whether the cohort is is more able or less able than previous years. How do we do that? Well, I've taken the figures that I showed you a moment ago. They're in the top right-hand corner. You can see the 3% in the very top right-hand corner. But what I've done now is to take each maths grade as my starting point. So if you look at maths grade 9, that's over on the right-hand side. Of all the students who got a maths grade 9, 38% got a 9 in French, 30 got a 8 in French, 16% got a 7 in French, and so on downwards. So we've got that maths grade as a starting point. Now, I suppose in your French cohort, you've got 10 students who had a predicted grade 9 maths. Then on this basis, you would get 4 of them would get a grade 9, 3 of them would get a grade 8, etc. So this gives you a way of actually finding out what is the ability of the students in your group expressed in terms of their likely maths grade and English grade, and then that will give you a feel as to what it's likely then to turn out in French, German, and Spanish. So what we can start to do now is to add it all together. We've just looked at our 10 pupils who've got a grade 9 in maths predicted. Suppose we're another 10 who were predicted a grade 8 in maths. Now it's a bit different in grade 8. If you look at the numbers there are fewer who are likely to get a grade 9 in French, which makes sense because they're not quite as top notch. So taking the percentages, one of them would get a grade 9, 2 of them would get a grade 8, etc. You repeat that for all of the maths grades and then add together the grade 9s in French. So you can see up top line, I said there'd be 4 grade 9s in French. Next one, I said there'd be 1 grade 9 in French. So that's where I've written equals 4 plus 1 plus ... Similarly for the grade 8s, etc. So hopefully that gives you a way of using what the school is defining as predicted in order to interpret that into the grades that you're looking for. I do recognise that this might be a bit overwhelming or lots of numbers and all complicated. Please just go and see your data manager. I've put up here, these are the grids for maths and English for all languages, French, Spanish, and German. And on that spreadsheet will be available alongside the slides in the resources, which come out as a link at the end. So in a sense, take the spreadsheet and give it to the data manager and say, please, could you do some sums and work it all out for me? So you've got all the languages there. So French and Spanish and German are the main ones, and the top one language includes all of the other languages as well.
Bruno's reading your mind all the time. He's asking questions as you've given the answer. So right there for the Spanish.
And if you've got dyscalculia, that's why I say just take the spreadsheets and pass them on to the data manager. We work as teams and we do that. What I will do though, back in year 10, Helen is really good. She publishes blogs, and she published in June the one I did back in year 10, and we started a new one. I will do some more little spreadsheets. Hadn't had time yet. We've just got the information, but do keep an eye on that. And if you've signed up for this webinar, then we can alert you through your email address as to when there's been an alert. So I will try and do some spreadsheets, but do appreciate that, as I say, if you're not confident with numbers, just find somebody who is. We work as friends, we're teachers, we're colleagues, we can all help each other. And I've talked about severe grading. It never does any harm just to keep reminding people this goes back to O level. It was 50 years ago that the paper was written, so this has nothing to do with GCSE or anything else. It just goes right back to the standards or percentages that were set at the time, and Helen maintains a page. Now, before I pass over, I just put a few slides up there which are nothing to do with grading and tiering, but are to do with languages. we're aware that EBAC is not going to be continued. It is of interest to see what the percentages are in each local authority and what was the change from 24 to 25. So the two left-hand one tables are the biggest increases and the biggest decreases. But if you notice that some of the decreases are actually from high numbers anyway, and where they've decreased to is much higher than a lot of other schools. So there's a lot of other local authorities. Over on the right-hand side, I put the highest in the country and the lowest. So that may give you a local context. And I've also done a little graph here that shows you the vertical is what percentage all the local authorities in the whole country are, and then the horizontal one is, has it gone up or has it gone down since last year? And then this was fascinating. This is from Ofqual. All of this is publicly available information. This is from Ofqual, and it tells you the percentage of students entering each of these subjects. There's a color coding there. You'll notice there's a little orange blob for Spanish in Rutland. And that's because in Rutland, there are only 5 secondary schools and 2 of them are independent schools. So it's not surprising that there's a higher percentage. All it takes is a couple of schools to do the Spanish, and that increases it. And I thought you might also be interested to notice that Hertfordshire is a hotbed of Italian. Polish is there, and things the others. This is just a bit. But do notice that the color scale does vary from one graph to the other. The Spanish one is very different from the others because of the distorting effect of Rutland. And that's me finished. Sorry, Helen, I've only left you 15 minutes.
No, thank you very much, David. And we're not surprised about Hertfordshire because actually on AWL London Committee, we have 2 people very interested in Italian. So
okay, that's good.
I'm conscious that there are questions there. You might want to have a little look through that.
Shall we finish the whole thing at 8 o'clock? If everyone wants to stay on after,
yeah,
then we're happy to go back and pick up on questions.
Yeah. Is that okay? Right. So yes, what have we got here? Yes, I did ask people if they wanted to ask any questions to let us know by last Wednesday, and I got a few questions here. So I'm going to start with some from Edexcel and then some from AQA. And then, yes, we'll come back and you can have looked at the questions. As Catherine said right at the beginning, our intention is to have for AWL members a separate session for AQA, a separate one for Edexcel, where we can discuss this. So I know that there may be a lot of people who've got questions. On the other hand, the fact there weren't that many questions, I feel that, you know, certainly the boards have done a good job of running training sessions, of providing resources. Certainly whenever I get in touch with them, I get answers. So I think that's a good sign. But I will touch on some of the things that people commented on. So first of all, for the Edexcel writing, this was something which came out particularly at the last webinar when we were looking at the writing. And there was a question really saying we'd like more guidance on using the mark schemes, and especially where different elements fall into different bands. And it was particularly for the overlap question, you know, the open-ended ones, the foundation higher overlap and the higher one. So in response, there are a couple of things that they said. First of all, they did draw attention to the fact that in case anyone's not sure of it, the criteria have changed. So now there's clearer guidance on the use of tenses. So now it's actually in line with the AQA one, where you have use of 3 time frames, 3 time frames, then 2 time frames. So when you look at it, that you do look at that to see that there are changes there. And there's also a clearer illustration of what constitutes a major error and a minor error in the glossary. Again, it now is the same as the AQA. So for use of tenses, you've got this. Oh, I've just said that aloud, so I don't need to repeat it. And then for the minor errors and the major errors, it's very simply minor errors are inaccurate but don't prevent the meaning. Major ones inaccurate and prevent meaning. So it makes it easier, I think, to quantify those. So that's helpful. They also asked, are there any sample assessment materials which illustrate full mark answers? Because that would help us with our understanding of the mark scheme, especially when the top mark is in a single mark band, or there's a phrase for example, there is some variety and complexity. So to know, to quantify what that word some means, if you had a full mark answer, you might have, it might be easier to be able to work that out. So the answer there was that I was given a document which I'm going to share with everybody who wants it, and it's got a link to all of the full or nearly full mark answers. So you have got full mark answers for the lower questions, but actually there aren't any at the moment for the 80 word question or the 130 question or the translation. Now, the rationale given was that any of the examples given were from real students who hadn't yet completed the full course. The examiner commentaries, and they really are very detailed, and they do help you to see what they could do to get to a higher or top mark in each skill area. So the exemplars are decided to be used alongside some training. You've got online recorders, so there's lots of help there. But still, I think the question that we came back with, and I did go back to them, was to say it would still be helpful to have a full mark answer. So there's the 8-page document, which will be made available for you. It's brilliant that they've done that. So you can just click on the link and it takes you to the examples of those higher marks. So, for example, if you click on one of them, there's an example of a nearly full marks. It's just 1 mark off full marks, where you have the student response and then a very, very full explanation as to why they were given those marks. The particular issue, they got full marks, in fact, on the response to there. For the linguistic knowledge and accuracy, they didn't get the top mark because it was deemed that there was only occasional variety. And that's the thing where I'm saying it probably would be useful to have something where we can see what does it mean to have some variety. So I've been spending a lot of time working on all this. I will again make this available if anybody wants to see it as to how I've been working out. But the thing that I think I would definitely recommend is look at the glossary that you get at the end of the document, which tells you what those words mean. David was talking about the importance of language, and it really is important to know, what does it mean? What does development mean? What does address mean? What does comprehensible mean? And it helps to look through that. And I've put together some grids where I've put different strands where you can actually highlight what is it that it's getting. And this particular one, you could see the problem with this particular one was that there were many minor errors. There weren't actually any major errors, but there were many minor ones. So that's how they didn't get the full marks. So that was the main thing on the Edexcel, and really watch this space because they have referred my request on for the full marks answers. AQA, a few little questions on that one. Just to make it absolutely clear, they've really said that additional marking guidance, which came out and surprised everyone, is definitely no longer in place. So it's been withdrawn, and there is the text of what was given. In particular, they were saying that no specific numerical requirements are only going to be for these tasks. So this, are not going to be applied to these tasks. So I'm hoping that reassures people that it definitely has been withdrawn, and the reason is given there. So, for example, on the read aloud, you can see that it really isn't. It's not numerical. For the photo card response, there's nothing numerical there. And the photo card question and answer, nothing about the number of questions which are being put. Okay, another question was about breaking down those 12 minutes for the speaking test. And there you've got an answer which is saying that there aren't any separate time limits. There are recommended times. The only timing restriction is the overall time. And in fact, they have now issued, and I would definitely recommend reading the whole lot now, the instructions for the conduct of the exams. That's already out now. That was issued in November. And you've got, I would read it really carefully, and it reflects what they've already got in the specification and in the SAMs, but it takes you through step by step as to what you're meant to be doing for the speaking. And in it does say the timing of the test starts at the point you begin the role play. So yes, the script is included in the timings. Okay, so that's the bit. I've just done a screenshot of what it says from the instructions about the conduct of the exam. It was noted that in the mark scheme for the read aloud, it doesn't seem to give recognition to people who do 3 developed answers. It jumps straight from 1 extended and a 1 developed to 1 developed and 1 developed minimally. When I looked at it, I thought it isn't necessarily that obvious, but this is what they've replied. If you want top marks in the read aloud task, all four have to be answered clearly. At least two of them have to have an extended response, which means there are three clear clauses, basically three verbs. And at least one other has got to be developed well. The other comment they make is that you're not having to comment on how good the language is. You're just looking at the information which is communicated and the number of clauses. So you don't have to at the same time be thinking about the quality of it. It's just the clarity of the response. So I don't know if this helps. I've just put this as my own little chart that I'd put where you could ring round where people get to. So of the four things they say, one clear response, one clear plus developed, and two clear plus developed and extended equals your top mark. And I've also put there the definition of what it means to be developed minimally, well, or extended. That's from the criteria. So that was really what I've just said about the fact that there are no marks in the reading aloud for complex or varied language, so you don't have to be thinking about how good it is at that stage. And then just to clarify, they don't have a section on every single theme. In terms of theme coverage, at least two of the themes are covered in the test as a whole. So you've got one in the reading aloud, one in the photo card, and the role play is not allocated to a particular theme. There are various things. This question was something which people came out with quite a lot when they were comparing the different boards. In AQA, can students be allowed to write on the read aloud task cards? The answer is that they can't, but they can write out the text as part of their notes and annotate it if they wish to help them deliver the task. So they can write the text phonetically or use the symbols if they wish, but they can't write on the card. Part of me actually thought, in fact, that might make it easier and less distracting if someone's got dyslexia, that you're not looking at the text if you have difficulty with it. But anyway, these are the examples that are given in the support from AQA as to what it could look like for someone doing French or German or Spanish. And I think this is the last one. On the translation, there seems to be an issue about the mark scheme going from some minor errors to regular major. Why can't we have some major errors? And their answer is that if you look at particularly the Prepare for 2026 courses on paper 4, the crucial point is that once any major errors appear, students can't score higher than a 3 for knowledge or vocabulary and grammar. So as you can see here, it really has to be, in order to be able to get above a 3, there mustn't be any major errors at all. And then finally, just to show you, and this will all come to you, the AQA and Edexcel have been brilliant at just sending me some slides. So you may well have seen these all before if you've gone on their various courses, but I thought it was perhaps helpful to have them here all in one place. So in particular, saying that you've now on the AQA, you're expecting to have another set of SAMs, which will be available next term. You've got all these commentaries on the 4 papers. I've mentioned on the AQA that that's been issued now, the instructions for the conduct of the exams, very good for the speaking. And there is a tiering guide. So David mentioned before about the Edexcel one. There's also one for AQA, which is really helpful with a helpful quick reference poster. And then for Edexcel, really showing you the sorts of things that you've got here. Lots of support given with a lot of exemplar material, teacher guides, mark sheets, frequently asked questions, extra tests. And for the AQ as well, there's a whole section where you've got additional tests that you can give, quite apart from the extra set of SAMs, these extra tests that you can give. Both boards are doing a lot of support on the speaking, as you'd expect, because we're doing the examining. And there's their tiering fact sheet, which is really helpful. So there's all the training that's on offer. And of course, you've got in both boards, you've got really nice people that you can talk to, and they'll be coming along. I'm really looking forward to seeing them on January the 17th, when they'll be coming along to give us a session. So that's the end of our
Yes. So do you want me,
bit.
there've been a couple of questions I'd like to pick up. Catherine, you asked, I couldn't answer chat as it was because that would have interfered with the delivery of the PowerPoint, so sorry I didn't answer them as they went through.
Should we
Catherine,
stop sharing the screen, or might you want to show it?
yeah, stop sharing.
Yeah. You can talk.
Was
Yeah.
asking, should you complete the same process on mock attainment rather than realistic expected grades? I think that's a really important point. Depending on, say, how your school is operating, it's around making sure that you are going to be comparing like with like. So if your school is wanting mock attainment grades to be delivered, then you do it with mock attainment grades, etc. You may actually find that that maths French comparison would still work. So if within the school you've got their mock attainment maths grades, then 38% of the grade 9 maths grades should still then be getting a 9 in French, etc., because both are being changed in a similar way, albeit girls may be slightly different from boys, etc. So there are other things to be going behind it, but certainly this point about trying to make sure it's an apples with apples comparison is really important, especially as I know schools do things, have different meanings to the grades that are being awarded. So thank you for raising that point.
I didn't notice you had the picture of the apples and the pears, but if people hadn't been to your people hadn't been to your talks, they might not have understood that.
Yeah.
I think it's about context, isn't it? And it's, as you say, have the conversation with the data manager, or the examinations officer, or who's in charge of data, and work that out according to our context, I suppose, isn't it? Because it might be that your maths grades are particularly strong, or your languages grades are higher than your maths grades, or what have you. But it's looking at what's happening in your particular school, isn't it? And the trends within the school. Yeah. It's a really good point.
And you should be able to find that by doing this kind of triangulation, you should end up with fairly similar numbers. And if they're not, then it's worth asking as to what assumption isn't hanging together, and then that hopefully will help with some of the decisions. Somebody was asking about the number on higher tier to remain on higher tier and move to foundation. To be honest, that depends on the decisions that you've made in terms of entering, or what assessments have been made. So it's hard to do anything. And trying to improve outcomes, I think what I would urge there is what Helen has done. Is it's surprising if by going through the mark schemes in detail, a mark here, a mark there does add up, and it doesn't really matter where you get the marks. Again, from I say, people can get hung up over grade boundaries on the different papers. You can get extra marks wherever it is. They just add up to give a total mark. So different students may be able to get an extra couple of marks, one paper, another student, one mark here, one mark there, just any little bits. And I say, being aware of the specification, just to almost train to get the extra bits.
Yes, I mean, I found it really helpful at our January event. Obviously, we're not going to be having a look back and advice on the basis of past exams, but that's always helped in the past, where people have said, look, and the main advice that I've always had is just tell them to keep it simple. Don't be too ambitious. And I think that was really what was driving a lot of the changes, was the feeling that, gosh, there's so much vocabulary, so many people are trying to get the subjunctive in. You do not have to do that. So, some of the principle behind some of the changes is let's make it more realistic for what you're expecting of students.
And correct.
And that's where this idea about having a sample of what a full mark 130 word answer can be really good to show students, to say, look, you just have to get 22 clauses. You don't have to get something fancy in every single one. Go for about 4 or 5 things, and make sure that you don't repeat words all the time. Show how many words you know.
Somebody's asked, are the boards still recommending that those who are predicted of 5 or below should sit foundation? That's really Ofqual advice as well, because of this risk of people falling off the bottom with a there is a little bit of a safety net with a 3, but sadly people do still fall off and get a U. The national data that I got hold of is interesting in terms of the spike around a grade 5, and comparing over the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years where we have been dealing with unusual circumstances. You can see that where there's an uncertainty, people are tending to be cautious and just put in for foundation. because they want to make sure they get the grade 5 rather than fall off the bottom and not get anything. So I think I would tend to support that. It's only in sort of value added calculations that it matters whether they get a 6 or a 5, and whereas falling off below a U can be not great. So I think that probably is sensible. I will try and do a little bit more analysis on that tiering and the 5s and do it via Helen's blog, but I think that it's a wise precaution to be probably going for the foundation if in doubt.
And I've just seen a message there about sharing. I will share everything that you've seen, including those mark sheets, which I have updated now. Now that Edexcel have tweaked what they've done, I will share that.
And how do people get the slides and the recording? They get an email.
Well, you'll get an email because you've all registered for this. So by tomorrow, I expect, even if it's not everything, I'll get something to you by tomorrow. And then if we've still got to refine things, that can come later on. And you'll have a link to the ALL London website where it'll be open for everybody to see. And also some of the things which David has done on the calculating bit, I'll be putting on my blog, but there'll be a link from the ALL website to that as well. Is that okay?
Thank you so much for all your amazing work, both of you. Incredibly generous, incredibly thorough. I really can't wait to go back to school now and have that conversation with our senior team and so get the information and get cracking with it. It's really, really helpful. And thank you, Helen, for doing that work and to going to the exam boards and getting that back. It's really incredibly important and powerful. And I can see in the comments that everyone agrees. It's absolutely brilliant. So thank you. I did think you said if anyone had any additional questions that we could stay on, but otherwise I think we are at time. I think well done for keeping to time so beautifully, and thank you very, very much.
Okay, so I will now stop the recording if I can find my little
Amazing.
This is always the bit where I'm looking for the instructions. David, where's it gone?
At the top.
Oh, here we are. Recording and stop recording. Are you sure? Yes.